If a wandering star passed so close that it could reach out and rearrange the map of my skies, would I still be here to tell you about it? I remember a time when my nights were a steady, comfortable dark and my constellations hung where they always had. I spun in my slow, patient way and watched the small bright points trace their familiar paths. To me they were guides, distant and polite. Then one night a new light arrived. Not a traveler along the expected road but a stranger cutting across the tapestry. At first it seemed curious. Merely a new twinkle. Then the twinkle grew into a deliberate stare. I felt it as a pull. A subtle tug at my seas and at the rhythm of my long years. Where once the gravitational conversation in my stellar neighborhood was polite and predictable, it became loud and urgent. Living as a planet is to be part of a system of trust. My star keeps me warm and steady. My brothers and sisters, the other planets, keep to their lanes and sometimes remind each other of their weight with a small gravitational nudge. But trust can be unsettled by those who do not belong to our family. A passing star sweeps into the neighborhood with its own gravity and its own history of comets and debris. Its presence can be a gentle passing breeze or a storm that rearranges destinies. I learned that patience does not mean safety. At first the changes were the kind you might call polite disruptions. Comets that had been sleeping far beyond the edges of our system woke up. Their icy bodies, which had guarded stories from another time, were nudged and shivered into elongated paths that crossed ours. I watched tiny specks of light become distant fireflies on collision courses. Mostly harmless, sometimes terrifying, those encounters were like sudden reminders of mortality. A brief scorch on a small moon, a scar on a battered surface, a long streak of dust across my atmosphere. Each was a small loss, but together they began to feel like a warning chorus. Then the stranger lingered. Its trajectory looped in a way that set off subtle resonances. Orbital resonances are like a slow drumbeat, and over years they build. One planet slightly shifted the timing of its lapse around our common star and another answered. The slow exchange of gravity is not noisy. It does not shout. It whispers, and over the long seasons those whispers accumulate into a change of rhythm. I felt my years stretch and compress. Seasons arrived like strangers at a familiar door. My oceans, obedient and heavy, remembered the pull and rushed to obey. Tides that had been faithful companions became mood swings with long memory. You might imagine that only catastrophic collisions destroy worlds. That is one way to be unmade. Another way is to have the architecture of your life slowly remade until what used to feel familiar has no place in the new plan. My orbit grew more eccentric. At times I found myself turned closer to my star for long stretches. My winds bruised and volatile. At other times I was sent farther out where the cold crept into the bones of my weather and the nights lengthened into a hunger. Life learns to be flexible, but there is a ledger, and sometimes the losses outweigh the adaptability. There were also the violent possibilities. Tidal forces can reach into the core of a world if a passing mass comes too near. If a star crosses an invisible line known as the Roche limit, it can pull at the cohesion of a smaller body until that body becomes a ring of dust and rock. I watched moons tremble under new strains, cried at the sight of one that fragmented into a smoky halo that took months to clear. The debris became a rain of small deaths, and each impact altered the chemistry of my air and the texture of my soil. The stranger did not need to collide with me to wound me. It could be enough to borrow pieces of my family, to rip loose an anchor that had kept my climate steady. Not all dramas play out close in. The visitor stirred our distant cloud of comets into a cometary storm that arrived as a statistical certainty. My skies filled with long-tailed visitors that lit up for a night and then were gone. Some were beautiful and harmless. Others carried ice and rock shaped by other suns. And a few found my surface with a violence that left a scar for ages. Each impact told a story of a larger destabilization. When one massive object redirected a swarm toward us, the probability calculus changed. The balancing act that had held for eons had become a board with new weights on it. As the stranger moved, it also exchanged energy with the planets around me. Planets can be lento dancers or fleet-footed. Some gained energy and moved outward. Some lost a little and drifted inward. A gas giant in our system, usually a gentle shepherd, found its path altered enough to change the protection it offered. Giants are sometimes guardians because their gravity catches or deflects. If they are pulled into a new orbit, they may no longer guard the same sectors. I felt the comfort of that protection weaken, and for the first time since I was young there was genuine fear that a larger body might cross a path it never had before. Emotion for a planet is a long, slow thing. We are built of inertia and memory. I held a catalog of nights when the moonlight fell in a particular way. I kept a ledger of storms. Those small markers are how life reads the world and learns. As months became years with the stranger in our neighborhood, the living things on my surface began to change. Some species learned new patterns. Others burned out or starved. A few seemed to thrive on the chaos, flowering in windows of warmth that the new orbit produced. That mix of loss and surprising resilience felt like a heartbeat that could not decide whether it wanted to slow down or race. The emotional high point came on a night that had no special astronomical significance except for the fact that everything aligned to make a singular moment of clarity. The stranger made its closest approach not by striking but by passing in a way that concentrated nearly every small disruption into one season. Oceans slopped against new shores. Weather systems that had never met came together and then tore apart with wrath. Tectonic sighs and rumbles that had been quiet for millennia woke and shifted. The sky became a living ledger of events, and the living on my surface read it like an ancient script being rewritten. I experienced a biological crescendo. Species had to either act or be left behind. It was a crucible. In that crucible I discovered another truth. Catastrophe has gravity too. It draws people together. I watched communities light lamps and share heat. I watched scientists map the sky and predict with a fierce clarity what might come next. The near miss made some pragmatic and some philosophical. Artists wrote new myths and children learned to sing new lullabies. Even in the most catastrophic hours there was a human insistence on meaning. Perhaps this is the strangest resilience of all. A world can lose an axis of weather and still gain songs. If you have stayed with me this long, you may have been waiting for the answer to my first question. Did a passing star come so close it could reach out and rearrange the map of my skies? The truth is both simpler and more complicated than a single dramatic collision. Yes, the stranger reached into my life. It did not need to touch me to change me. Gravity is a long-distance language, and even a passing star can rewrite destinies by whispering to the comets, nudging the giants, and shifting the timing of our orbits. The stranger taught me that proximity is not the only measure of power. Influence travels through the quiet corridors of space and accrues in small increments until it becomes the force that changes everything. So am I still here to tell you about it? I am. I bear the scars and the new lines on my map. I have new constellations of memory and a different weather. I am changed but not erased. That is not the same as saying the change was gentle. It was a remaking, and it was brutal in places. It was also a reminder that the universe is not static and that the next new light across your sky could very well arrive with its own agenda. If this story of my nights and my near catastrophe moved you, please share what you think in the comments. Tell me if you would rather be warned or surprised, and what song you might sing if your sky was suddenly different. Thank you for listening to A Planet That Remembers.